Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel NPA Discovery, the place where we explore the hidden stories behind Hollywood's brightest legends. If you're new here, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because your support gives us the power to bring you more deep, emotional stories from the golden age of film. Today, we're diving into a story that might change the way you see one of the most beloved names in movie history, Robert Redford. For decades, Redford's name stood for perfection: golden hair, piercing blue eyes, and a charisma that seemed untouchable. He was the heartthrob who never stumbled, the leading man who never broke character. But behind that image was a man at war, with Hollywood, with fame, and often, with himself. This is not the story of a perfect movie star. It's the story of a rebel, an artist, a father, and a man haunted by loss, who fought his own ego as fiercely as he fought for creative control. So, let's start from the beginning. The troubled boy who refused to follow the rules. Robert Redford was born in 1936 in Santa Monica, California, a time when America was still shaking off the Great Depression and preparing for war. His childhood, however, was anything but golden. Many fans see Redford as the clean-cut, disciplined man of the screen, but few know that he was once a street kid with a chip on his shoulder. As a teenager, he joined a group of local boys who called themselves the Barons, a gang that dabbled in petty theft and vandalism. It wasn't exactly the origin story of a Hollywood gentleman, but perhaps we should see that as his first act of rebellion, not against society, but against pain. Because Redford's childhood was scarred by tragedy. He lost his favorite uncle at a young age, a man he deeply admired. And just as he graduated high school, at a moment when most young people are full of dreams, his mother died suddenly of septicemia. Redford was devastated. Many actors find fame chasing dreams. Redford found art trying to escape nightmares. After his mother's death, he wandered aimlessly, turning to art as a form of therapy. He spent months in Europe, sketching, painting, and searching for meaning. But success didn't come. He sold his paintings on the streets, barely making enough for food, until one day, he realized he had enough money only for a ticket back to America. That failure, as painful as it was, became the foundation of his resilience. He had seen the world, failed in it, and somehow survived. When he returned to the US, he shifted his focus to acting, a decision that would change everything. But it's interesting, isn't it? The man who would one day control every frame of his films began as someone completely out of control of his own life. Redford's acting journey started in theater, modest, uncertain, but full of fire. He wasn't born a star, he built himself into one. When Broadway gave him his first taste of success in Barefoot in the Park, it was clear that something about him stood out. His performances had an effortless coolness, a mix of confidence and restraint. He didn't just play characters, he inhabited them. But no one could have predicted what would happen in 1969. That was the year Redford starred in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, alongside the legendary Paul Newman. The chemistry between the two men was electric. Newman's relaxed charm balanced Redford's intensity, and together they created one of the most iconic duos in cinema history. But here's the twist: the studio didn't want Redford for the part. They saw him as too young, too unknown. It was Newman, along with director George Roy Hill and writer William Goldman, who fought for him. It's ironic, isn't it? The movie that would define his career almost never happened for him. Once it did, Redford's life changed overnight. He became an international sensation. But with fame came a new kind of prison. Suddenly, everyone saw him as the golden boy, the face of perfection. And Redford hated it. He started wearing disguises in public, using fake names, pretending to be an exchange student from Bogota just to go unnoticed. He didn't want to be adored for how he looked, he wanted to be respected for what he could do. That's the quiet tragedy of fame: the world starts seeing you as a symbol, not as a person. The visionary, Redford's legacy and the birth of Sundance. By the 1980s, Robert Redford had achieved something few actors could: he transcended the screen to become a cultural institution. In 1980, he directed his first film, Ordinary People, a quiet, devastating family drama that stunned critics and audiences alike. The film won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director, establishing Redford not only as an actor of substance but as a filmmaker with soul. Then came his greatest contribution to American cinema, the Sundance Institute. Founded in 1981, it was born from Redford's desire to give independent filmmakers a voice. At a time when Hollywood was obsessed with blockbusters, Sundance became a haven for visionaries, people who wanted to tell raw, personal stories without studio interference. Through Sundance, Redford nurtured the next generation of storytellers, filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino, Steven Soderbergh, and Darren Aronofsky, who would later define modern cinema. Today, Redford is remembered not only for his timeless roles but for the values he stood for: integrity, artistry, and truth. He was the rare actor who never sold out, the rebel who turned his back on fame to build something real. Even in his later years, when he announced his retirement from acting, Redford spoke with the same calm conviction he had as a young man: "The thing I value most is freedom, freedom to create, to think, and to live without compromise." And perhaps that's what made Robert Redford not just a movie star, but a legend of conscience, a man who never forgot where he came from, and never stopped searching for what truly matters. The private battles behind the fame. Despite his calm, collected public persona, Robert Redford's personal life was marked by deep pain and quiet endurance. Beneath the charm that audiences adored lay a man burdened by loss and introspection. His marriage to Lola Van Wagenen, the woman who had stood by him before fame, through his struggles and early dreams, began to falter as Redford's world grew larger and lonelier. The spotlight was relentless, and Redford's desire for solitude often clashed with the demands of Hollywood. After 27 years together, they divorced in 1985. But it wasn't fame that broke them, it was distance. Redford spent more time in the wilderness than at red carpet events. He found solace in nature, where he could think, paint, and breathe without judgment. "Nature," he once said, "has always been my church." Tragedy shadowed his family life as well. His first child, Scott, died of sudden infant death syndrome. Decades later, his youngest son, James Redford, a filmmaker and activist like his father, passed away in 2020 after a long battle with cancer. Those losses left deep scars, shaping Redford's lifelong empathy for the human condition, an empathy that radiated through his work. Though he rarely spoke of his grief publicly, those close to him said it was the reason Redford valued simplicity and sincerity above all else. Fame had never been his true reward, peace was. The activist, a voice for the planet. If there was one cause that defined Robert Redford beyond cinema, it was his fight for the environment. Long before green activism became fashionable, Redford was using his influence to protect the American West. He campaigned for clean energy, defended public lands, and criticized politicians who ignored climate change. His activism wasn't performative, it was personal. The mountains of Utah, the rivers of the Rockies, and the red canyons of the Southwest were his sanctuary, and he devoted his life to preserving them. Through his Sundance Institute, Redford quietly funded environmental documentaries, giving young filmmakers a platform to expose the corruption and greed destroying nature. He also served as a trustee for the Natural Resources Defense Council and worked closely with Native American communities to support land rights and conservation. To many, Redford represented the best kind of celebrity, one who used fame not to elevate himself, but to amplify truth. When asked once why he cared so deeply about nature, Redford replied, "Because it's honest. Nature doesn't lie, it doesn't pretend. If you mistreat it, it shows. If you nurture it, it thrives. It's a reflection of who we are." His environmental work earned him honors, but more importantly, respect. While Hollywood often celebrated glamour, Redford quietly embodied purpose. The final curtain, reflection, legacy, and farewell. As the years passed, Robert Redford chose to slow down, not out of fatigue, but out of reflection. The man who once defined Hollywood's golden age had watched it transform into a world of sequels, streaming platforms, and instant fame. Yet Redford remained timeless, a living bridge between artistry and integrity. In 2018, after more than 6 decades in the industry, he announced that The Old Man and the Gun would be his final film role. The movie, about a charming, aging bank robber who refuses to stop chasing adventure, felt like a perfect metaphor for Redford himself, defiant, graceful, and unafraid of endings. When asked about retirement, he smiled softly and said, "I've done what I wanted to do. I've told the stories I believed in. Now it's time to listen." Redford's influence, however, never retired. The Sundance Film Festival, now one of the most respected film events in the world, continues to give voice to independent creators who dare to tell the truth, exactly as he dreamed. His name remains synonymous with authenticity, courage, and artistry. Today, Robert Redford stands as one of the last true gentlemen of Hollywood, a man who never let fame define him, who turned grief into strength, and who built a legacy rooted not in glamour, but in integrity. And as the curtain slowly closes on his remarkable journey, one truth remains unshaken: Robert Redford was never just an actor, he was a storyteller of life itself, finding beauty in its fragility, and meaning in its silence. Love, scandals, and the man behind the mystery. For decades, Robert Redford was known not only as one of Hollywood's most talented actors but also as one of its most enigmatic leading men. Women adored him, the press chased him, and yet, somehow, Redford remained a mystery, distant, private, and completely uninterested in playing the part of a celebrity heartthrob. After his marriage to Lola Van Wagenen ended in 1985, Redford kept his romantic life tightly guarded. While tabloids speculated endlessly, he rarely confirmed anything. What people didn't know was that behind that quiet exterior was a man deeply loyal, but cautious, someone who had seen too many relationships collapse under the spotlight. Yet even as Redford aged gracefully, whispers surrounded his career, stories of how he had occasionally clashed with directors, and how his perfectionism made him difficult to work with. Some insiders claimed that Redford's pursuit of authenticity often turned him into a creative tyrant on set. But his collaborators almost always followed such remarks with admiration. As one producer put it, Redford didn't want to make movies, he wanted to make meaning. That made him tough, but it also made him great. Still, the very privacy that preserved his dignity also fueled rumors. Journalists painted him as aloof or detached. Others accused him of arrogance for rejecting the trappings of fame. Redford, however, never bothered to respond. He had no interest in defending himself to gossip columns. His silence was his statement, and in that silence, he remained untouchable. The quiet years, legacy beyond the screen. After announcing his retirement, Robert Redford didn't vanish, he simply returned to where he belonged, among the mountains, the wind, and the wilderness of Utah. At his ranch near Sundance, he spent his days painting, writing, and working with his wife on art and environmental projects. Though frail with age, his mind remained as sharp as ever. He continued mentoring filmmakers, quietly appearing at Sundance events to encourage young artists who carried the torch of independent cinema. His later interviews carried the tone of a man at peace, a man who had made peace not only with his fame but with his losses. He spoke often about time, how fleeting it was, how unforgiving, yet how beautifully it revealed truth. "I've always believed that life is a story," he once said. But not every story needs an audience. Some are just meant to be lived. Robert Redford's later years became a reflection of that philosophy. He no longer sought to be seen, he wanted to be understood. To those who knew him personally, he was not the movie star or the activist. He was simply Bob, the quiet man who preferred the company of trees to crowds, who loved silence as much as he loved art. His legacy, however, endures far beyond his lifetime. Every year, when a new filmmaker walks onto the stage at the Sundance Film Festival and presents a film that defies convention, Redford's spirit is there, watching quietly, approving silently. He redefined what it meant to be a Hollywood icon. Not through power, not through scandal, but through integrity. In an age obsessed with noise, Robert Redford built a legacy out of quiet conviction. And perhaps that is why, even as the lights fade and the cameras turn away, his story continues to inspire, a reminder that true greatness is not about being seen by everyone, but about being understood by a few.